Hello, everyone. My name is Asher, aka Ash We Up, and you're tuning in to America's Oil. First and foremost, before we begin, I just want to say God bless you. This podcast is about getting each and every single one of us as believers to become activated in the body of Christ to carry out our assignments. And if you're not a believer, this podcast seeks to build you in your understanding to know who Jesus is and why you should give your life to him. This is the first episode. So in this episode, I'm just going to briefly tell you a bit about myself. I'm going to give you my testimony. And I think the perfect verses that start off with this is actually in the book of Genesis and the book of John. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to John chapter 1. And I'm going to start at verse 1. And so it says, "In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him." So in the beginning, the Word with a capital W already existed, and everything God created was through this Word, and this Word was also God. And nothing that you see in this world, in heaven or on earth, was created except through this Word. The Word gave life to everyone that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. The Word that's spoken of in John is Jesus. God spoke Jesus into existence. In Genesis 1, chapter 3, it says, "Then God said," in Genesis 1, verse 3, it starts off saying, "Then God said." Once God spoke, there was light. That light was the Word which gave life to everything. And this Word that gave life to everything was Jesus. And God spoke Jesus into existence. What God spoke was Jesus, and I can't say it enough. And I'm going to explain that this is true because God spoke Jesus into my life. So in this episode, I'm going to tell you guys my testimony and how God spoke Jesus into my life. And hopefully you all will know that God, America, has spoke Jesus into your life. So once again, my name is Asher, and this is my story on how I ran away from home in pursuit of finding God, joined a religious cult, got married and divorced, fell into drug addiction and witchcraft, and how I came out of it and found Jesus. My story begins in the year 2020. I had recently graduated high school and started school at Broward College, and I began working my first job at the Fresh Market down in Fort Lauderdale. I was a cashier. I was in a very dark time in my life, not because of what was going on around me, with COVID and everything, but because of what was expected from me. You see, I grew up with both my mom and my dad. However, they got divorced when I was young, and they would take turns taking care of me. My childhood was good though. God have really blessed me, so I'm not complaining. I didn't grow up struggling for food or clothing, and I was never in a state of poverty. My mom and my dad did their very best in raising me up and providing for me. Though my childhood was good, I watched my mom struggle much to get to where she is at now. I grew up in a Christian household. Jesus was taught to me since birth, but growing up, I didn't really know who God was to me. Neither did I have a real relationship with him, so being a Christian was just tradition. I would always read Psalms and Proverbs and pray before I went to bed, until one day I met a friend whose name was Carl, who was a Hebrew Israelite, and challenged my faith and knowledge of the Bible. He argued that the Jesus I worship wasn't real and that I worshipped a whitewashed version of him. He then sent me some videos to watch that were supposed to explain the Bible and God to me from a true point of view, which he was claiming the Hebrew Israelites. I remember I was so mad and frustrated because he was bad-mouthing the God I worship, and he was condemning me for it. Excuse me. When I had calmed down, I then watched the videos and I became intrigued. I would say the reason why I was intrigued was because I didn't have any real Bible knowledge. So because of this, everything that the video was teaching made sense, even though it was lies. I was amazed at how much these Hebrew Israelites knew Bible history. And so I left my Christian faith and became a Hebrew Israelite for a short time, however. In the Hebrew Israelite doctrine, black people are the true children of God. And God is coming to save black people. They tie in slavery to Deuteronomy 28. And looking back at it now, it was just black supremacy. I think deep down, I really just wanted something to identify with and something to give me purpose and meaning. I also wanted to feel a sense of belonging. Back then, I struggled with these things. I had no purpose, didn't have much friends at all, and I didn't know who I was or who I wanted to be. I struggled with insecurity, depression, and pornography as well. I eventually fell away from being a Hebrew Israelite and began to study New Age spirituality. You could say I fell into the woke culture, playing with crystals, looking into crystals, looking into different philosophies, etc., etc. However, in 2020, after graduating high school, everything changed for me. I now had to be an adult. I had new responsibility, had a job, was paying to go to college to be a nurse because my mom was a nurse. I'm the only child, so I can't fail. And COVID is here, so culture has changed. I had a reality shock. Being the only child brought a lot of pressure on me, and I was afraid of failure. Problem was, though, I didn't know who I was or who I wanted to be. I was living with my mom at this time, and I had a lot of expectations I had to meet. I couldn't handle the pressure. I was going to school to be a nurse, not because I wanted to, but because my mom was, and I wanted to make her happy. I was working a job I didn't like because I had to be social and engage with people who wanted to take their frustrations about the store out on me. I didn't know how to deal with that, and my anxiety would skyrocket. I was ultimately depressed. I had to grow up and find my way in this world, and I didn't know how. I was missing something. One day, when I was home alone with my dog, I was pacing back and forth around my house. I was alone, and so I didn't have anyone to share my mind with. I was trying to figure life out, and I was deep in thought. I then realized something. I told myself that everything that I studied about spirituality and enlightenment has not given me any sense of fulfillment. I was not happy at school, and I didn't like my job, and I wasn't sure where I would go from there. I wanted answers. I wanted meaning. Most importantly, I wanted truth. I then began to recall being young and reading my Bible verses, and I realized that only thing that gave me a sense of understanding was the Bible, also known as God's Word. So I said, okay, though I don't believe in Christianity, I'm going to read and study God's Word for myself. I opened my Bible to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and from there, it was history. God began to speak to me. I was learning so much about God, I wanted to learn more. I became obsessed with His Word. I rededicated myself to the Hebrew Israelite, however, and studied the Bible under their doctrine. I was learning so much about the characteristics of God, the Torah, and the history of Israel that I had to share with somebody. I desired fellowship. My friend who introduced me to this doctrine was in the military at the time, and I would text him everything I was learning, and we would discuss them. I started making videos on YouTube to vlog what I was learning. At first, they were private, but my friend said that I should make them public after sharing the videos with him. I was also watching other YouTubers who were Hebrew Israelites, and so now I was part of a community. I had a friend, a platform to teach, and a community I was a part of on the internet. I began to have a sense of purpose. A false prophecy was spreading throughout the community that God was coming back in 2024 for his people, and that COVID was the beginning of his judgment on the nations. Because of this, many of them began to form physical communities in preparation to leave. I watched one video from one influencer who was explaining his point of view of the prophecy. I then made a video on it and reacted and reached out to him and shared it. He approved and even invited me for fellowship. I denied but kept the offer in mind. We were both in the same state, which is Florida. I began to study more and more, and I dropped out of college without telling my mom. One day, as I was working, I decided in my heart I wanted to go get baptized. I then got in contact with the influencer who was known as an elder, and we set up an appointment. I was baptized out in Kissimmee, Florida, and for the very first time, I met like-minded individuals. I then drove back home feeling like I was closer to God. I was so happy to meet other Hebrew Israelites as well. I wanted to be with them. I believed God was with them. Looking back at things now, I believe the reason why I believed in the prophecy because it was tied to the idea of an exodus of God's chosen people. Like in the book of Exodus, I knew in my heart that God was calling me to leave my current situation and all of my worries and seek him. I needed to know who I truly was. I needed to know who God was. So I left school because I thought I was failing and I no longer wanted to pursue a career I didn't want, and I knew I had to find a better paying job. I knew that eventually I had to tell my mom I was no longer in school, and the disappointment and anger she would have towards me was my biggest fear. I already failed at college once, and I was going to be a failure again. I at least wanted to have a good paying job before I told her. One day, as I was at work, I received a comment on one of my videos from a lady whom I eventually met, and she gave me a prophecy saying that I was a baby in the Lord's hands, and I was being given off to be trained up by prophets. I knew God was taking me on a journey soon. My mom found out that I quit school, and a huge argument broke out inside the house. I remember breaking down and crying and telling my mom I was sorry I failed her. In her grief and disappointment, she reminded me that I wasn't a failure, and we both went to bed afterwards. Also, I remember during this time, I was reading the book of Exodus, and I had also recently watched, I believe it's the movie Prince of Egypt, the one with Moses, and watching that movie and reading Exodus, I felt like God was preparing me to leave and go on this journey to find him. So much so where in the book of Exodus, the people, before God had delivered them from Egypt, he had them sacrifice or slaughter either a lamb or a goat, a male lamb or a goat, and spread the blood on the doorways. For those who don't understand the meaning, and it's a little graphic, don't worry, you will understand all that stuff later. But I remember within this week of me leaving home, my mom prepared, it's a Caribbean dish, but she prepared a goat and had it actually butchered. And this was the first time I had actual fresh goat meat. And I was thinking to myself, like, there's no way that this is a coincidence. And so the next morning, she came into my room saying that I will go back to school and gave me orders on what to do next. Before I even got out of my bed, I had a sense of peace. Though my mom came in and gave me instructions on what to do, I knew already what I had to do. I wasn't going to school to be something I'm not, and I am going to find God. As soon as my mom left my room, she went back to sleep. I called the elder and told him I was coming to stay with them. I packed my stuff in bags, plastic bags, like plastic trash bags, got in my car, and left home. Without saying a word, I left my mom, my dad, my family, my job, and even my dog that I love so much behind for the sake of finding God and getting closer to Him. Before I left home, my mom had bought a whole goat and had it butchered. During the Exodus, the children of God had either a lamb or a goat butchered and had its blood wiped on their doors, so the angel of death would pass over them. So the lamb or the goat today, specifically the lamb, represents Jesus, and Jesus died on the cross for our sins. So anyone who doesn't believe in Jesus Christ, it says in the book of John that those who don't believe in Jesus Christ, they are condemned. Let me see if I can find it for you real quick. So John chapter 3, verse 16. For this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. God sent his Son into the world, not to judge the world, but to save the world through him. There is no judgment against anyone who believes in him, but anyone who does not believe in him has already been judged. So we know that Jesus was crucified. He was put to death, crucified, and raised again on the third day. So that blood of the lamb that was wiped on the doorpost in Israel, that represents the blood, Jesus' blood covering over his believers. And those who believe in Jesus, his blood covers us from our sins or the sins that we committed, and therefore judgment passes over us. So, returning back to my story, I saw my mom as a pharaoh in the sense at the time that needed to let me go and find out who I was. I saw it as symbolism, and God was telling me it was time to go. Even her coming into my room and telling me what choices I would make next instead of letting me figure my life out for myself. Before I left, I wrote a Bible verse on a piece of paper and poured anointing oil on it. The verse was Luke 14, verse 24, which states, "If you want to be my disciple, then you must put aside your mother, father, family, your own life, and follow me." I drove 4 hours from the city, down South Florida, all the way to the country in Pomona Park. During the drive, I felt excited like I was going on an adventure. Back home, I would daydream, escaping to a distant land away from the world, and I felt like my dream was coming true. I also felt really sad. I cried much because I felt I would never hear or see my family again. God was coming back in 2024, and I was the only one who was woke about it. Excuse me. But I told myself that I would find a way to save my family as well, and have them be gathered with me. It was also said in the false prophecy that God was coming for a people who left the world because they did not love the world and gathered together and lived amongst each other, like in the book of Acts or the days of Noah. So I believe that where I was going was not just a regular place, but a land of salvation where God would pick up his people. As soon as I arrived, I was nervous. The people that were over there at the time was, and I'm give an abbreviation for the name. Brother B, Brother D, the elder, his wife, and an old woman and her grandchildren, and another woman with her 3 kids. They welcomed me in and gave me a mattress to sleep on until I got either a room or a shed. The environment was like this. The land was big, and he had farm animals, goats, chickens, and a cow. He had 2 guard dogs and puppies that were half wolf and half German shepherd, and a cat named Judah. Each person that came had eventually buy a shed for them to live in on the property. However, the people who were there would put their money together to help pay for the next person's living expenses. When I arrived, nothing was forced on me. They fed me, provided me a place to sleep, and told me to just rest and not worry about work right now. Granted, I was telling them how eager I was to work and do whatever was needed to provide for the community. I was able to freely study God's word without distractions or opposition. And I had people around me that supported me. I went on an errand with Brother B and got some food afterwards. We all had fellowship as we ate, and I did my best to fall asleep at night. I slept next to a fish tank, so I would watch the fish and listen to the sound of the bubbles to help me fall asleep. Judah would occasionally join me too. I was completely isolated and away from home, everyone and everything I knew. I had cut off all contact. But why go to such lengths after all? This was crazy. Moving to the middle of nowhere to be with people I don't even know? Have I gone crazy? I certainly lost my mind. If you would ask me, then I would give you the same answer I'm giving now. I knew God was calling me, and I knew I had to seek him, no matter what it took. I was willing to sacrifice everything to chase after him. Because tied to him was my identity. To know myself was to know God first. To find God was to find me. When I decided to leave home, I placed my faith in him. I said to myself and God, okay, God, I'm forsaking everything and coming after you. I put my trust in you and that you will take care of me. I woke up, and the next day, I already had a job opportunity to work at Hydro Aluminum Facility. I was given an entry in by our barber, whose nickname was Slick, who would come and give us haircuts. I accepted the job and began working. I was so excited. I was on a new life journey. I was no longer depressed. A few nights later, I had a strange and terrifying spiritual occurrence. I woke up in the middle of the night and felt some weird spirit-like thing take hold of me. I let out this loud scream, and then it vanished. It felt like there was a tether around me, but it wasn't squeezing tightly. It was just holding me firmly. I then saw Brother B come out of his room and walk to Elder's bedroom door. He didn't look at me. He didn't knock. He stared at the door for 5 seconds and walked back to his room. So think of a hallway. I'm sleeping on a mattress on the floor, and I'm next to a fish tank. On the other side of me is the table, and right in my head is pointed towards the hallway. And so when I screamed and got up, I was looking in the direction of the hallway, and I saw Brother B walk down the hallway from his room to Elder's room, which was where I was next to. looked at that door for 5 seconds, and walked back. Till this day, I really don't understand what that was about as far as him. And I even asked him about it, and he said he didn't even remember that day, which was strange. There was a lot of demonic activity happening before I even knew what demons really were. Everyone that came onto that place described experiencing some spiritual activity. During my time on the land, I would help out by schooling the kids, taking care of the animals, and maintaining the property. I would vlog my activities and also the things I was learning. The people would come and visit us. Some looking for shelter, others trying to escape their lives, but all believed in the same thing. We would host gatherings and invite people as well. There would be times where me and Elder talked. There would be times where me and Elder talked. The people in the community believed he was a prophet and their spiritual father, and his wife their spiritual mother. One night, and this was the night that I'm telling you, this changed everything. Like this is where things really started. Like, I left home, but once I got here, this is where the test for my life begins. One night he came to me and told me that I was going to be married and I had to get married. My heart jumped, then sank. I never had a real girlfriend or relationship before, and now God is going to give me a wife. I was blown away. Around this time, I was 20 years old. Yes, I was 20 years old. I'm now currently 23. So this was about three years and some change. 3 years and some change. From that day on, I was so eager for God to bring her. I could not stop thinking about it. Eventually, a few more people came to stay. Sister C, brother BR and his pregnant wife, and Sister G. Sister C was the woman who gave me prophecy on my YouTube. So the woman who gave me a prophecy on my YouTube, she also came to the land or to the property. And we moved her down all the way from Georgia. She was like a mother to me. She took care of me and looked out for me. Brother BR and his wife came trying to escape the vaccines at the time because they believed that it was the mark of the beast. Crazy, right? Sister G was also another woman just on a life journey. Everyone was much older than me, in their mid-30s and up. I was 20 at the time, and we also had guns. I was given a Kel-Tec and a pistol. Eventually, after I had got my shed to keep with me. With everyone who was coming in, I saw this place as a land of salvation. One day, I remember I was walking down the land to go get something off on the property. I don't remember what it was, but the elder, he had his AR, and for some reason he told me to go and get this thing, but the problem was the animals, they were a little rowdy, and so it would probably be difficult for me to get it. And so what he said was, he says, go ahead and get it. I'm going to go ahead and clear out the animals for you. So as I'm walking down to go to the section of the land where the animals are and to go over the fence. He takes his AR and he shoots in my vicinity, but not at me. And he shoots, I think it was 3 times. This loud, first time I heard like real gunshots, I would say, bang, bang, bang. And I'm just thinking to myself, I've already had, these dogs that don't know me, they're half wolf, half German Shepherd. So, and they're guard dogs. So, I think it was a miracle that even when I got out the car, they saw me, they didn't jump and attack me. And now this dude who I don't even know, he has his gun and he's shooting in my vicinity. But, the bullets don't hit me. He's shooting at the ground near the animals. And everything at this moment in my life right now in this season is just faith. I'm literally a sheep amongst wolves. My life at any moment could, end for whatever reason. I'm not in the safety or the protection of my home anymore. I'm not next to family anymore. I'm living with stranger and with, domestic animals and, criminals, ex-criminals, gangbangers, drug addicts as my neighbors. But nevertheless, I place my faith in God, and I trust in my life in His hands. And so to continue on, in the story, I was 20 at the time. We also had guns. I was given a Kel-Tec and a pistol. Eventually, after I had got my shed to keep with me, with everyone who was coming in, I saw this place as a land of salvation. My focus shifted from studying God to the community. One night, I was sleeping. I was taken up to a heavenly place. It was like a white room, and a man sitting on a throne, and next to him was another man. My body withered away, but my heart remained. My heart pulsating. I was crying, but not in terror, but because I felt overwhelming love for me. One day I overheard Elder and his wife talking to someone on the phone. It was about a young woman who was leaving her life of sex trafficking and stay with me. So around this time, there's also people, occasionally we would go and do a few minor jobs like a moving company. We would go and baptize people. I remember I baptized a family and one young lady. And so life was pretty exciting. It was just new. It was fresh. But it was also still dark. Dark not in the sense of physically, dark spiritually. It was dark because I wasn't aware. I didn't know who Jesus was. And so because of that, I fell victim to many things that I will get to shortly. So one day I overheard Elder and his wife talking to someone on the phone. It was about a young woman who was trying to leave her life of sex trafficking and stay with us. Her pimp, however, was not with the idea, but decided to let her leave for a while to rest. Within the next week, she arrived overnight. The next morning, I had got up to go and work in Sister C's shed. We were putting up drywall and painting when I stepped onto the front porch and looked inside. I saw someone sleeping. my heart jumped. When I say my heart jumped, my heart jumped. And mind you, I just got up. I didn't go shower. I didn't go freshen up. I had locks at the time, so I didn't take care of my hair too much either. So I was just looking crazy. I mean, I was my mind. I'm just going in there to work, so I don't really worry. I'm not trying to worry about my appearance right now. And then I go just to see this person sleeping, and as I look in, she just decides to wake up, and so my heart jumps. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, is that her? So I'm quickly trying to run back because I want to see her first before she see me. So anyways, within the next week, she arrived overnight. I saw someone sleeping. My heart jumped and I quickly walked away. I went inside the main house and everyone introduced themselves. We called her Tay. At first, when I saw her, I told myself I was going to keep my distance and let her be. Boy, oh boy, was I wrong. I remember going into the kitchen and seeing her reading some books, and I came in and began to share with her all that I learned. She was so intrigued and wanted to learn more about God. We began to be lovers quickly, being that I was 20 and she was 19, and we were the only ones at our age there. She was running away from her life of sex trafficking, and she was seeking salvation for the life she lived. I was running away from my blessed life to find out who God was for myself. So see the two different dynamics. She's actually going through hell, physically. Hell was in my mind. She would give everything to have where I was coming from. I would give everything to have more of what my spirit needed. And so ultimately, both needs brought us in the same place. Doesn't matter whether you're, a low-end person on the street or whether you have it good in a mansion. If you don't have Jesus, if you don't have the love of God, if you don't have his joy, you'll be in darkness in your heart and in your mind, no matter where your status is in life. She was running away from a life of sex trafficking, and she was seeking salvation for the life she lived. I was running away from my blessed life to find out who God was for myself. It had to be her, I thought to myself. I don't know why I loved her, but she grew on me. I wanted to take care of her, and she wanted to follow me. Before we even decided to get married, everyone was shipping us. My mom came to visit and dropped off my dog, Jasmine, and she met Tay. My whole world was coming together. I had my mom's support on my journey. I had my dog. I found love, and I have built a community. It was up. So me and Tay, we were lover birds. Remember at this time, I was strongly intrigued by the birds, cardinal birds. I would see them all the time. This is the first time I actually saw cardinal birds, those really red birds. And I looked it up on Google, and they symbolize marriage and, reunions and, coming together and stuff like that. And so I remember when I saw these birds often, it was around the time that she came, and even at her job, the first job that she had out there, her first, well, not her first legal work, but in a long time, she had a job as a waitress at this, it was like a fish and barbecue shack kind of deal. Forgot the name. But inside the store, there were paintings of cardinals. And I remember just pointing them out to her like, hey, look, like there's cardinals here. There's paintings of cardinals here. Like, this is crazy. It's like every sign that God could give, it's like he's giving it. like this person is meant for me. This person, we're meant to be married. It's in the atmosphere. Love is in the air. You know, this was someone, this was someone in my life that I was so close and connected to. Like, I had crushes before. I had girls that, I talked to before, but this one, like, this was real for me. This was to a deeper level. I saw her as, my kingdom spouse at the time. So, but there was a problem, and from that problem came other problems. Her pimp had her car, and she needed to get it back. So she kept in contact with him, trying to get her car back. He had no idea who I was and what we were planning on doing. Though she was with me, she was still tied to him. I knew this, so I didn't trust the situation. She would always feel guilty after having to talk to him, and then come to me. I would remind her that it was okay and that I understood the situation. Backtrack. There was a time where I was shot at. But let's fast forward. We fell in deep love for each other, and he got married. At the time, I found the love of my life. One night, I had a spiritual encounter. I felt energy travel up my spine and hit the back of my brain. I began to hear an evil spirit chant, money, 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 over and over again. I then had a vision of the elder stressing over finances. I felt a financial problem was on the rise. Eventually, the vision came on the land, and it was led by the elder's first member, Brother B. During this time, there was a rumor that the elder had stole money from Brother B's wife, who he had recently got married to. And so it was a very hard thing, because she was someone that I want to say financially gave the most, but she was a big asset. So for that rumor about him to steal from her, it was a huge deal. She wasn't someone that was just a regular person. Like, she was a huge asset. She committed so much. And also the man that she was married to, he was the elder's right-hand man. Like, he was the yes man. No matter what he said, he did it. So this was like a huge stab in the back. And this started so much drama, so much beef, that everything was escalated. People started to hate Elder. People started to go against him. It was actually so big that a segregation started. Even people that weren't necessarily living on the property, but who were a part of the community, but were like living elsewhere, I think it was even on Twitter at some point. I think he had like a group on Twitter. They were conspiring and, dropping so-called information that wasn't known about him all over Twitter and to each other, that there was this big group against him. And due to the drama, I remember things got so stressed. I was worried about Tay, because in my mind, I'm thinking she left her life of drama and misery and slavery and captivity only to come here to where there's more drama, captivity, stress, and all that stuff. Like, she doesn't deserve that. So when all this is going on, I'm stressed about how can I help bring peace back, but I'm also stressed about how can I, help keep this parade, like this is the place of salvation for her to believe, because I may be stronger in my faith about this place, but for her, she already saw through the screen. I couldn't see through the screen because to me, I had no choice but to believe like this was the place of God, because if this was not the place of God, if I was wrong, this meant that I had to return back home, and that meant once again that not only was I a failure, but this time I failed myself. Not my mom, not my family. I failed myself, and I was wrong. And so that was something I just couldn't accept. That was a truth I couldn't be ready for. I gave up too much to be wrong about this. So I had false faith, false expectation. I had faith in the wrong thing. Though God still brought me here for the reason, I had a false understanding of what that reason was. But in time, as I continue to explain my testimony, I will reveal what that reason was. So, eventually, division came on the land, and it was led by the elder's first member, Brother B. During the time, I tried to keep myself and Tay out of it. Elder has always took care of me and never let me starve or go without shelter. So I told him no matter what people are saying, I'm sticking with him. Everyone had to pick a side. My worry was the chaos would cause Tay to leave once she get her car. I felt it was getting to that point. I saw the stress with her past life and this now coming upon her. I became very scared for my relationship. Word got out that Elder had stole money from Brother B and his wife. His wife was the woman with 3 kids. After they got married and caused distrust, and this caused distrust and sparked a rebellion. The controversy reached media as people who were not living on the land, but who we associated with, started to join Brother B in rebellion against Elder. I was so angry at him, I was tempted to run into his shed, fight him, and even shoot him. Because the antagonizing got so high one day, Elder's wife had enough and knocked on the door of Brother BR and his wife, who was pregnant. They came out and she grabbed them by their hands and pulled them off the porch. The wife called the cops, and when they got there, they arrested Elder's wife. This caused more conflict now. Elder's wife family got involved and wanted to drag Brother B. So imagine if you from the hood, imagine like a whole family pulls up to basically beat up, jump, and kill this one man. That's what happened. As soon as she got arrested, her son, her daughter, their kids, their cousin, everyone came and was about to, drive this dude, Brother B and Brother BR off this property. And I was scared too, because at the end of the day, I'm here by association to Elder, not to these people. For all I know, for all they care about, everyone can leave, because the woman that got arrested, she is the owner of this land. She is the owner of this property. So in their eyes, they're seeing all this shenanigans that's popping off is because of these random people that she has allowed to come, and now they're ruining her life and her land and her name. And so to me, we were technically all in danger. But there was a certain fear that they had towards her husband, who is the elder, because he was a rough dude himself. He was alcoholic. He was a drug addict. He was an ex-gang member. He's been in, prison. Story's not about him, but, he wasn't, just to paint a picture, like he was a rough dude, very rough dude. So he was, he wasn't the type of person that you wanted to mess with. You know, the only thing that really kept him calm was, him drinking some form of alcohol. He drank so much alcohol, he had a barrel outside. I think it was a barrel or two, like those tin barrels. Think of a barrel that they store rum in. Think of it bigger than that, but it's also metal, and it was filled with alcohol bottles and wine bottles outside. That was from his drinking habit. This caused more conflict as now Elder's wife family got involved and wanted to drag Brother B off the property and hurt him badly. A whole gang came and even neighbors. It was a mess. Elder's wife was released with an ankle monitor, and within the week, police came and arrested Elder. Apparently, the Elder had some warrants and was actually in hiding. It made sense because he would hardly get off the property. He would always send everyone to go run errands. Go buy this from Winn-Dixie, go do that, but he would never leave. He would send everyone to do his errands. With him gone, I was now the man in charge spiritually. I was doing my best to keep everyone positive throughout the process. In my mind, God was getting ready to bless us, but first he had to sift us and remove the snakes. This was the reason for the chaos. Excuse me. It would have made sense to leave, but I felt that if I left, I would have given up on my faith with God and I wouldn't make it. Within a month, Elder was released, but throughout the process, I felt the relationship with my wife at the time was strained. The problem was trust. I didn't trust her. I felt she was planning on leaving me behind. She was constantly on the phone with her pimp. And I know it was because of her car situation, but I felt there was more going on that I didn't know about. After all, she would always be ashamed coming back to me after her phone call. One night, as I was picking her up from work, she told me that he was on his way. My heart sank. This was it. We got home and I went to bed. The next morning, I arose early, pick up animal feed to feed the animals, and I was driving back to see this car riding behind my tail. My heart dropped to my stomach. There was nothing I could do. I had to let him in the property. We both parked. He got out his car first and walked straight to the door. Tay was right at the door, and when she opened the door, she gave him the biggest smile I have ever seen on her. She never smiled at me like this. I was crushed. She had really told me a week prior that we should have not gotten married. I enter into the house and I hear yelling. They were sitting down and talking in Elder's room. Everyone, he felt betrayed because in his mind, he sent his property to Elder to rest and be taken care of, not to leave and get married and start a new life. It took everything in my body not to pounce and beat up this man. He was saying things that had me believing Tay shared with him our business. So I was heartbroken and betrayed. Tay at this time was two things, strong and numb. She began crying, and to see her cry shocked me. I then gave her a decision. I told her I decided not to hurt this man because I said it wasn't God's way. So I told her she can freely leave. I won't stop her, or she can stay and I will defend her. We walked inside my shed, closed the door, and I took her clothes out to help her pack. She stopped me and said, "I am not leaving. I am going to set him up." My eyes opened wide. I realized what she was saying. She packed some clothes, but left others with me. So hindsight, when I think about this now, um, going on the perspective of, if that was really her true intentions, I think, because it's like, well, if she really didn't want to leave, then she would have just chose not to leave. I think deep down, she didn't want me involved in her mess. Um, she, she, I think personally, she saw me as a form of comfort, and he was obviously her bondage, and she didn't want to mix the two. So for me to get involved, that would kind of um, taint that image. Also, if she did um, love me the way I loved her, I think part of that as well is she probably was trying to protect me, but that's neither here or there. But I just give that explanation if you were thinking the same thing I was thinking at the time. Like, well, why didn't she just choose to say? Um, my eyes open wide. I realized what she was saying. She packed some clothes but left others with me. She got in her car with him and left. I began to text her, and then suddenly she blocked me. I had no contact with her anymore. I don't know if depressed or suicidal describes how I felt. I became dead inside. I was a dead man walking, full of anger, bitterness, and wrath. I began to smoke a lot and drink every day, trying to drown the pain I felt. My dog died 2 weeks later. She had gotten sick, and I had buried her out in the cold past midnight. She died at night, and I was watching the Goofy movie at the time. So it was about I think it was between 1 to 3 o'clock in the morning. And, I had a form of insomnia because due to the trauma that I just experienced of the heartbreak, I couldn't sleep. And so I was drowning myself in like gin and weed edibles and blunts and just smoking a lot. And I would watch like Disney movies and stuff that wasn't really serious but comical and childish because I felt like that light, innocence, gentleness had just left me. The light in my soul left me. And so I would watch these things to kind of keep me sane. There was no reason behind it. I just watched them just to watch them. And I remember as I was watching the Goofy movie, I knew that my dog was dying. And so if anyone doesn't know the Goofy movie, Goofy, the dog on Mickey Mouse, it's about him. He has a son and everyone's a dog. And so I was watching that. And she had gotten sick, and I buried her out in the cold past midnight. So it was around winter time. So I think it was actually like December. She died at night, and I was watching the Goofy movie at the time. I knew she was dying. I was mad with God. I started to hate him. Why would he let this happen? He protected Abraham's wife. Why not mine? I wanted to leave and go back home, but I wanted to prove to God that I wasn't a quitter. I'm here to stay. I would drown out my depression with alcohol and weed. But one day I got really sick. My glands were clogged, and because of my depression, I became unhealthy. So I was so sick. I had like this chronic headache, and I was so weak I couldn't get up. I was literally like bedridden. Sister C nursed me back to health, and if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be here. I had gotten a hold of moonshine, and I, at one point, had drunk so much I almost overdosed. One night, I felt the alcohol. It was like it rushed to my brain. I felt like my brain was about to scramble, but then it just stopped. Like God just stopped my brain from like just getting scrambled. Like I felt it, like I was gonna die, and God stopped it. So hallelujah for that. I felt the alcohol rush to my brain, and it felt like it was going to explode. But God saved me from death. I wanted Tay back. I loved her and miss her. I texted her on Facebook to try and get in touch with her, but I got no response. The kids would try to cheer me up. So the kids that were on the land, they would try to cheer me up, to play with me, but I didn't want them to see me as I was. They knew I was hurt. They'd asked me if she was coming back, and I couldn't give them an answer. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe her, because she returned back to her old lifestyle. I had divorced her. Some time had passed, and it was January. This all happened in December. An elder called me in the room, and they were watching tarot videos. These were videos about what the future held. This was my gateway to witchcraft. Elder was the leader, so whatever he did, I would do in obedience because I believed God was with him. I was addicted to these videos. I wanted to know what was next. I wanted to know if Tay was coming back. I was desperate for her, and most of them said she was returning. There was even some scary accuracy about certain things that took place, but it was demonic. I wanted my love back, but other wanted vengeance. So we all fell deep into witchcraft. We did chants, burned sage, bought spell books, crystals, and charms. Whatever it took to manifest her back in my life, I would do. I became my own God. I wanted to control my reality. I wanted her. One day, I woke up and I was just different spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. I was on a mission to rebuild this land and manifest the reality I wanted. I would work gigs to earn money, and I would get high and drink every day to keep me going throughout the day. I couldn't let depression stop me. Tarot videos were my other drugs. They kept me motivated. I then began to do tarot myself and try to interpret it. I was obsessed. I wanted spiritual power, and I wasn't relying on God anymore. I didn't even realize I stopped reading my Bible. I didn't even realize I stopped praying. I became so spiritually high-minded, but so deprived of spiritual truth and the foundation, the Word of God, because I didn't know the Word, who is Jesus Christ. I didn't even realize I stopped praying. One day, as we were all gathered doing our chants, I saw I had a notification on Facebook Messenger. It was Tay. She told me, trust in the process. I jumped for joy and told everyone. They all hated her for what she did, but I defended her all the time, even though I had hate for her. However, I knew something wasn't right with what we were doing. Time went by and I got discouraged. My shed got removed off the property because it was not paid fully, and I was now sleeping on the couch. Most people had left, and it was just me, Sister G, C, and Elder and his wife. One day, I had went to go do a gig, and it was around summertime. I had shared a room with the guy who was in charge, and he had ordered a prostitute to come. When I saw her, my heart sank. She was terrified. I thought to myself, is this what it's like for Tay? I left the room. When I got back, I never worked with him again. I was on the road for 2 days and only got $100. Aldo had a drinking problem. Most of the money I made went toward his wine bottles. We never did or finished any other projects on the land. He drank so much, he had 2 barrels and a small shed filled with alcohol bottles. To be honest, I feared the man. I believed he was God's anointed, so I did not want to doubt him. I feared judgment from God. Though I wanted to question his leadership, I chose not to. I wanted to believe in the lie because it was all I had. Accepting it meant I would have to go back home and I couldn't quit now. This has to be the place God has to come. I left everything behind for this. I witnessed him and his wife fight physically a lot. They would even drag me into their arguments. I was broken, damaged. So I would drink and smoke. On one particular day, I was with my neighbor who I was helping move to a pastor's house. And he was like a really good friend. He was a weirdo, an older guy. I don't know. He was a pothead, but I believe Jesus was also calling him, like everyone. But I don't know. I was just very friendly and open to people who, if you were to see me and see the people that I associated with, you would wonder why would I, what do I have in common with these people to be their friend? And the answer was nothing. It was just little that I know that God had placed a heart of shepherding in me to be a friend to anyone, no matter their background. But I had to wake up first and know who I was. When we were done, we sat down and had Bible study. And we read 1 Corinthians 7 verse 10. So I helped. So he had to move from where he was staying at to the pastor's house because apparently there was an allegation towards him that he had touched one of so he was living in a house with his friend, and his friend they go way back, and his friend who was married, his wife was there, and I think someone else, they had kids, and so he lived with them, and he was accused of touching one of the kids, and so therefore I remember the kids, they got taken away. DCF came and he had to move away from the property. And so he moved into this pastor's house, or this man who was going to be ordained as the next city pastor. And so I helped him move there, but he wasn't proven guilty. So I helped him move there. And when we did Bible study, and we read 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 10, which Paul states that if a wife leaves her husband, let her remain single, or else be reconciled to him. The whole day I felt joy, but I didn't understand it. Later that night, when I was home, an unknown caller calls me after a bubble flies by my face. I answered the phone, and it was Tay. For the very first time in months, Tay called me. And I say months, I think it was about 3 months, because I think this was around February. But this felt like years. Years. Like the days felt like years. The hours felt like days. The minutes felt like hours. The seconds, etc., etc. And so when she finally called me, it was like, oh man, this was the best thing that happened to me. However, I was excited and angry. How could you left me? You betrayed me. I told her if she wants to even speak to me, she needs to tell me what's going on. She said she has been beating. She said the pimp has been beating her, and that she was sorry. It took longer than she thought, and she didn't know when she was coming back. She said, when I come back and take her, because she knows that I will, why would I do that? Why would I take her back? I told her, I love you. That's why. I have to go now, she said. Goodbye. Click. And that was the last time, till this day, as I'm making this podcast, that I heard from her. I had peace for a short time, but it didn't last. We kept doing witchcraft, and on a certain day, the 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 tree that Brother B and his wife got married under fell down by itself. We fed the branches to the animals, but we took the wood and made a huge pit. Elder told us that God told him to take the wood, put it all in a pile, and burn it. So this was clearly a demon speaking to him, not God, and we were about to do a witchcraft ritual. And you're about to see what this had done. So little did I know, the tarot cards, the rituals that we were partaking in, the jewelry, it opened a door into my life to receive demons, which I will explain later in the story. We burned it and cited some chants, and a month later, Brother B was in jail for domestic violence against his wife. Vengeance wasn't received. So peep this, right? So Elder and his wife, they have a problem. They have an issue in their marriage, which is domestic violence, right? After we do the witchcraft ritual, Brother B and his wife, right, they divorce, and the Brother B, he gets arrested for domestic violence against his wife. So basically what happened is, when we did that ritual, that spirit that was in charge of domestic violence, that was over Elder Nico and his wife marriage, it got sent to Brother B and caused that domestic violence, and then sent him to jail. So it was a spiritual transference, or as you could say, the demon that was over Elder, it got sent on assignment basically to do the same thing to them. And what happened to Elder now happened to Brother B. So like how it says in the Bible, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, that's what happened, but through the force of demonic power. And so that's witchcraft in a nutshell. But he wasn't satisfied. So after Elder had done that, he wasn't satisfied, and the person I love was still missing. A ritual was done on me without me knowing. He had me bury an item in a bag. Things began to die. All the animals were dying, including the dogs, and we barely had enough money to feed the cattle. One day, we gathered for our regular chant. An elder yelled at his third eye bracelet, meant to attract money. Now, remember earlier in the story, I said how I heard a demonic spirit keep repeating money, money, money. And then after that, I received a vision of Elder stressing about money. And I look later in the story, he has a bracelet that's meant to attract money. I began to cry. I realized we had put our trust in idols, and the spirits we were trying to control were fallen angels. Eventually, the kids left. I complained to Elder that I was putting in the most work out here, yet I was sleeping on a couch and not in a room. I believed that in order for Tay to come back, I needed a room so we could be together. So I felt not having a room was delaying my miracle. That's how desperate I became. A group meeting was called, and I had a dream about it, and exactly what happened in the dream is what happened in real life. Both Sister C and G left, and now I had the choice of 2 rooms. I was the only one left, just me, Elder, and his wife. They told me now that I have what I want, I better not let them down like the rest. But I said, why would I leave? Little did I know that God used me to do a sweep of the land before it was time for me to go. I had what I wanted, but now I was all alone. I realized finally that Tay wasn't coming back. I sent her a long message on Facebook telling her I was going back home and I prepared to leave. I tried leaving before, but I convinced myself to stay. But this time, it was for real. I was done with this spiritual journey. I was done with looking for God. I missed my family and friends. I missed home. If I was gonna be left behind, fine. I wanted to enjoy the remaining time I had left home with the people I loved. I asked myself, who am I? I had lost my identity. I told them I was leaving and it was time for me to go. They didn't fight me or argue. They let me go in peace. I remember during this time, God would also communicate with me through music videos that I watch, and there was this one music on Vapor Memory, the YouTube channel that I listened to, and I just had an instant wave of nostalgia of my childhood, of my friends, my family. I cried. I wanted to go back home. I was tired. I was done. I said, I don't care anymore. I said, no matter how bad I thought life was, no matter how bad I thought my life was, all I care about now is just the simple things. I just want to be with my friends and family. I do not care about this spiritual highness no more. I do not care about trying to find God anymore. I just want to live now and just be in the comfort and peace of my family and friends. And still smoke my weed. But, so I drove home 4 hours with the same feeling when I left. I was 19 going on 20. Now, going back home, I'm 21. So, a whole year had passed. I finally reached my mom's house. Fear hit my heart instantly. What have I done? I just left God. Now I'm going to perish. I called my dad and beat my chest and told him I was freaking out. Little did I know what I was feeling was the presence of demonic operation against my life. I didn't realize the consequences of the sins that I partook in and that they were coming quickly against me. And so I had a sudden rush of fear that was due to that. I felt death knocking. I was so bad, I was willing to drive 4 hours right back, and it was nighttime. My dad told me it was okay and to just calm down and come to his house. I got home. My stepmom was home, and I went to sleep on the couch, and not even my room. When my dad got home, he saw me. He went in the bathroom and cried. I was a prodigal child. I had to readjust. I felt I lived another life. My dad found out I was smoking, and because of this, I stopped. I flushed my stash away. I tried reconnecting with old friends from work and found out when I left, they started a rumor about me that I was gay. I was so angry and hurt over and over again. I began to work with my grandfather at his AC company to try and earn a living, but that didn't last as I just stopped. I reconnected with my childhood friend, which gave me happiness. Though I came back home, I still had attributes of the past. I still messed around with tarot and I would burn incense. Though I didn't smoke weed, I would still smoke cigarillos. And so during this time, like, I didn't realize it yet, but I was demonically I was heavily influenced by the demonic. My mind, like, the way I was thinking, I wasn't myself. And I remember I would think much and much, I have to return. I have to get my vengeance on Elder. I have to get my vengeance on those people. They took so much from me. I gave them all my money. I gave them, everything I had, At a time when I was over there and I was weak, when he was drunk, he told me, sometimes, Asher, I just want to knock your teeth in. Like, this man who I look up to for protection, for security, he tells me that he wants to punch my teeth in. And then his wife basically tells him that one day Asher's going to stand up to you in the middle of their argument. And then he says again, if Asher even dares stand against me or tries to stand up to me, I'm going to knock his teeth in. And I just felt so powerless. Like, first, the person I loved, they get taken away from me by someone who at this time I deem a dominant male figure, and now another dominant male figure is saying that they would knock my teeth in when I look up to him for protection. So I was just in this place of weakness and brokenness and defeated and being kicked down time and time again. And so I was like, in my mind, nah, like, I'm gonna go back, and even if it gets me killed, I don't care. I'm gonna die with my pride. But I never ended up going back. And so one night, as I was researching a familiar spirit, I had a dream that was so real, it wasn't a dream. A woman knocked on my door, and I opened it. She was dressed in all black and attacked me. She said, "I got you," and I fell to the ground. Fear came on me instantly, and I felt I was going to die, and I could hardly speak. I realized I did something wrong, and I needed God's help, and I asked God to save me one last time. I ended up pushing the demon out in the dream. I had another dream that my stepmom randomly barged into my room. Instead, it wasn't my stepmom. It was a demon disguised as her. She came and attacked my leg. I woke up, and at this point, I realized I was in trouble. I needed help. I decided to give Jesus a chance. I had no other option. So I called my dad and told him what was going on. They prayed for me and got a fellow believer named Rick to lead me through salvation and prayer. It was a process, but I was set free from my demons. Jesus saved me. Now I knew Jesus was truly the God of the Bible. I had hit rock bottom, and he was the only one who could lift me up. I dedicated my life to Jesus. I had nothing left, so he filled me with his spirit, and I became like him. God began to use me. A month later, I got baptized and began to work for UPS. As I was dropping off a package at a door, an old woman stepped out. I was already walking off, and she said, "Jesus is Lord." And I said, "Yes, he is." She called me back and she told me that God has been watching and that he saved me from death more than 3 times. She then began to pray for me. And so that's the end of my story, my spiritual journey of how I left home, joined a cult, got married and divorced, fell into alcohol addiction, fell into witchcraft, and how Jesus has redeemed me from my life of misery, depression, pornography, and spiritual death. And what I learned from that is that everyone who came to that community were either running away from something or trying to escape, were a slave to something, or there was something about the reality of life they couldn't handle or accept. So they sought refuge and placed their hope on man-made idea, on what they think salvation should look like. The truth is, no one can escape their trials, and wherever you run to, it will follow you and drag you to a bottomless pit. But it is in this pit where we have the opportunity to see God for who he truly is. At our lowest point in life, the only one who can bring us out of it is God. I went to find God, but my walk led me to find pain and suffering. So you see, our trials and suffering doesn't mean we are far away from God, but they are meant to bring us closer to God. This is because when God brings you out of it, only he can get the glory and credit, not you or any man. As the Bible says, it was good that I have been afflicted, that I may learn thy statutes. That's in the book of Psalms. God is near to the broken and contrite heart. Nothing can separate us from God's love. Book of Romans. Before my pain and suffering, I didn't know God because I didn't have a real reason to worship him. Now I have a reason. The question is, in this dark moment, are we going to take matters in our own hands and try to find God and ask, God, how can I encounter you in this moment? Because Jesus is here. He is near to each of us. He brought us all this point in life to ask him that one question. And so I leave that with you guys. I'm going to read a book in Psalms. And so I'm going to read Psalms 2 for you guys. Psalms 2 verse 1. Why are the nations so angry? Why do they waste their time with futile plans? The kings of the earth prepare for battle. The rulers plot together against the Lord and against his anointed one. Let us break their chains, they cry, and free ourselves from the slavery to God. So you see, this world wants to free itself from what they think is slavery to God, God's way, God's commandments. But see, God has established his law, his word, not to enslave us from the ability to have fun, but to protect us from the evils of this world that wishes to steal our life, that wishes to steal the light in us, the light, the true light that gives us life, which is our purity. But the one who rules in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. There in anger, he rebukes them, terrifying them with his fierce fury. For the Lord declares, I have placed my chosen king on the throne, and this is Jesus, in Jerusalem on my holy mountain. The king proclaims the Lord's decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. So Jesus is saying now to God, Jesus is saying that God has called him. You are my son. Today I have become your father. Only ask, and I will give you the nations as your inheritance, the whole earth as your possession. So the nations belong to Jesus. The earth belongs to Jesus. You will break them with an iron rod and smash them like clay pots. Now then, you kings, act wisely. Be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with reverent fear and rejoice with trembling. Submit to God's royal Son, or he will become angry, and you will be destroyed in the midst of all your activities. For his anger flares up in an instant, but what joy for all who take refuge in him. See, I was saved once I took refuge in Jesus. Had I not take refuge in Jesus, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys today. Remember, in John chapter 3, verse 18, there is no judgment against anyone who believes in him. God sent his son, verse 17, into the world, not to judge the world, but to save the world. You see, anyone who doesn't believe in Jesus, we have already been condemned because we have all fallen short of the glory of God. We have all fell into sin, and the wages of sin is death. In my life of finding God, God has showed me how imperfect I am. Look at how when I became desperate, how I fell into witchcraft, how I abandoned him, how I stopped reading his word, how I stopped praying. Maybe if I didn't fall into witchcraft, maybe if I prayed to him, then maybe I would have saw my salvation. Maybe I would have heard God's voice. But instead, no, I fell into alcohol. I fell into weed. I trusted in tarot cards. I trusted in false prophecy. And because I trusted in these things and I trusted in my own power to redeem myself, I fell deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into darkness. I wanted to free myself from the chains I believe were putting on me by God. But see, God, Jesus, his son, who is his salvation plan for mankind, has came down to free us and set us free from our chains of sin, that we may walk in joy, that we may walk in freedom, that we may walk with the power of the Holy Spirit to overcome our sin and to truly be free and to proclaim our freedom, that many other people may see this light of Christ Jesus, that they too may be saved. So this is my story, and I thank you all for listening. There will be more to come. I will try to upload weekly minimum, but on my best, I'm pretty sure that I'll do my best to upload daily. This has been America's Oil by your host, Asher, aka Ashley Up. I pray that God blesses you and God keeps you. Tune in next time.